For those of you that listen to this podcast consistently, you know that this is for people that are primarily in their 20s. And maybe if you're a little bit older, this can be an encouragement for you about the next generation. And so a lot of my guests are people that are in their 20s. And mine today is someone that when I met, I was like, she could be 35, not by the way that she looks, but by the way that she acts and by the things and responsibilities that she has. And I cannot wait to share some of those with you today. I've got a great guest for us, Jacqueline Chandler. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here with you.
You were like 35. Oh no, I
can't wait to be 30. So that was like such a big compliment to me.
Jacqueline is like the kind of person that just really carries herself in a very mature way, not in like a prideful way, but I just feel like you're living with a lot of intentionality, which I think our people will hear about today. I went to high school with her husband. We go to church together. And one of the first things I heard about Jacqueline, of course, she wasn't going to brag on herself, but I quickly heard that she had been the SGA president at Auburn University, which I guess is, kind of a big deal, right? And I heard you were the third ever female SGA president. You got to tell us some about that.
Yeah, that's a story that could take days to tell, but the short story of that is I learned through my time at Auburn. I got involved through student government when I first got there and was a first generation Auburn student and didn't know anything about campus or student government or how any of that worked. But I had always, through my high school years, been really involved in the community and wanted to continue that at Auburn. And so SGA which stands for Student Government Association, was kind of my pathway to do that. And I got to the end of my sophomore, beginning of my junior year, and needed to think through what I wanted the end of my college career to look like. And everybody started getting internships and doing different things. And I just really felt called to look at the skill sets that I had developed and the relationships that I had. And the question I kind of asked myself was like, where can I best serve Auburn with what I've been blessed with and the people that have invested in me. And so as I looked at that, SGA president was kind of the best way to do that. And so it was terrifying because at the time there were no women really on the executive team for all of SGA, much less an SGA president. And to become SGA president, you have to run a campaign, which means your face is everywhere, which is just so uncomfortable. And you really have to put yourself out there, and people are not always kind. And when I was running, social media was really becoming a big thing. Social media had been out there, but in kind of the generation that I was at Auburn, campaigns got built around it. And so, with social media, you open yourself up to anybody's opinion. And that's not necessarily a fun thing. And so there was definitely a glass ceiling to be broken and a culture to be changed. And it was really cool to see the Lord really walked me through that and call me to that through people speaking truth into my life and encouragement. And he also protected me a lot too with the people that he put around me that just always kept me rooted in his word and ensured that the path that I walked was one that he was calling me to.
That's so awesome. And yeah, I'm sure that was a difficult time to break into this as we go back to, I'm trying to think what that would have been like 2017, 18. Okay. Yeah. 2017. I mean, you obviously social media has been around, but I know that that's probably when it's like, if you're building a campaign, it's not necessarily posters anymore. Like I'm sure you have those, but it's all over social media. And when you go to a campus or a university like Auburn and there's thousands and thousands of people, I'm sure there's plenty of people that are fine sharing their opinion. And so was that like something that you were prepared for? Were you prepared to maybe see some of the things that you did?
No, not in the slightest. But that's okay.
Yeah.
We had a great team though that made the most fun out of the most awkward things and maybe not kindest things, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And I'm sure you learned a lot along the way, but what was it like? Tell us about your experience and some of the things that happened.
Yeah. So the coolest experience ever, from mentorships that were developed to people just helping me along. I was just amazed at the kindness that was shown to me. And kindness, not through just encouragement, but kindness through really hard feedback sometimes. And I had to grow up really fast, and I had to be put in rooms with board of trustees. And I was at the time we were negotiating a new dining contract. And I was in all those meetings with the executive team at the university. And so I was very quickly having to be very poised and very knowledgeable. I will never forget, I went to visit Wayne T. Smith, who was a board of trustee that lived in Nashville. And I took my spring break. This was wild. My junior year spring break, I went and visited every board of trustee in their hometown and met with them. And I visited Wayne T. and he put down the financials book about this big of Auburn. And he was like, you need to read this. You need to be aware of what's happening in this. And I was like, I am not a finance major. And so anyways, I just had to have a lot of information thrown at me. And I also had to balance being a friend and being a college student and going to class. And so it really stretched me. And the level of responsibility was honestly very isolating because I had deliverables and I had things that I had to do in addition to attending class. And my dad told me when I started Auburn, if I had below a 3.5 GPA, we'd have problems. So, dropping my GPA was not really an option for me. And so, I had to really balance all that. But also got like really great experiences. Got to have breakfast with Tim Cook, my very first Apple Watch. He handed to me personally. And so just some really great experiences and got to enjoy those alongside friends. And thankfully my husband Austin too. And so at the football season of 2018, Tim Cook was on the Auburn commercial and it panned over students in the student section. And he had asked me personally to hold the iPad that he zoomed in on or FaceTimed in on. And Austin was there. A lot of my friends were in that commercial with me. And so just some really great experiences to complement kind of the challenges that came with it.
That is super cool. And I think that's just something that you obviously were learning at such a young age. You've got all the students of Auburn that are looking to you as the SGA president, who granted probably have no idea everything that role entails. Like they have no idea that you're traveling to Nashville and getting given a book by a board of trustee members. And so you're in that role, which a lot of leaders find themselves in, where they're trying to please kind of someone above them, a board, and then please the people as well. And ultimately we know that we can't please everyone. And so I bet that can be difficult. And I want to talk about just some of the emotional health behind that here in a second, because I know that's important to you. But real quick, you mentioned feedback, and I think that's huge. Yes. You said you had to take some really hard feedback. I think receiving feedback takes a lot of humility and isn't easy to do. Is there anything that you learned through that process?
Yeah, it was. It's really interesting to look back on that and be in a position now where there's people that are younger than me at work that I get to work with and giving them feedback. So it's kind of been a cool tie-in. So when I look back, kind of the way that looked for me was we would be in a meeting and I would walk through it and we'd walk out the room and I got immediate feedback. And the next time I learned very quickly, it's better to ask questions on the front end than make mistakes, have feedback on the back end. So I started having pre-meetings to the meetings to go, hey, what are we covering? What is my role in this? Because all this was new to me, from facilities meetings to transportation meetings to meetings with the city. I had no clue. And so I learned quickly to ask before we walked in. But now I realize, being a busy professional, how much time it takes to give feedback and how much emotional consideration goes into feedback and how it's delivered. And when I look back on the time and thought that people put in to guiding me, I am just blown away. And that really has encouraged me to do the same for others. And I read a book one time and it said that no feedback is unkind. And so to really be kind to someone and believe in them, you have to give feedback. And to do that well, you have to be in a healthy emotional state yourself. And I think I find myself in a hurry sometimes and something not going right, and I'm quick to want to give feedback. And that is probably not the best time because I'm not emotionally my best. And I haven't taken time to slow down, eliminate hurry, really reconcile how I'm feeling and how that's manifesting in feedback. And that could be just in a casual conversation or something really direct of something we need to improve. And so I look back to all those mentors that did that for me and was really encouraged to this day to be able to do that for others.
That's awesome. I love that you've got to be in an emotionally healthy spot to obviously receive feedback, and feedback doesn't have to be bad. It could be good. I think we should give good feedback, 5 times more than constructive, but also being in an emotionally healthy spot to give feedback, because if something kind of makes you angry and then you go off emotion, that can be really damaging to someone, obviously.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love what you said about giving good feedback too, because I think we do always hear feedback and assume that it's associated with something negative. And, there really is a beauty in praise. And in the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, it talks about how you need to be lavish in your praise. And a great lesson that I learned when I was SGA president is I felt like I tried to praise a lot after reading that book. And there were some teammates that received it really well, and there were some teammates that felt as though I didn't give any praise. And in that book, it talked about giving specific praise. So instead of saying, hey, great job, saying, hey, great job on X, it really created this impact and allowed this to move forward and create this relationship. And so I had to get really good about giving direct feedback, and that's something I carry with me to this day.
I love the way you put that. The way we talk about it at WildSpark, the company I work at, we say when you're giving feedback to someone, celebrate, champion, and challenge them. So I think it's something along the lines of like celebrate like the work that they've done, and then you champion who they are, and then you challenge them. Maybe it's, if it's like some constructive, then you might challenge them to like do something better or challenge them to improve. But I think what I'm hearing you say is like, yeah, you say, hey, great job facilitating that meeting. That's the celebrate. But then the champion is like, I think that you're someone that's really good at influencing other people, and I appreciate that about you. And then challenging them, I think that's probably a lot from that book too.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would love to hear real quick before we jump into talking about like emotional health, about how you were the third ever female SGA president at Auburn. And it sounds like there's been like a legacy that's been created from you through that, if you know what I'm talking about, with other girls since you.
Yeah. So I think, I ended my year as SGA president, and I think felt a little defeated just because it's been a long year and I learned a lot in a year. And one thing I don't think a lot of people talk about is that your first year out of college is never easy. It's a really big transition. And so I just went from a year of like drinking out of a fire hose, having really high highs and really low lows, of like awesome experiences, really hard days, long days, into post grad. And we were so very lucky to get to stay in Auburn after Austin. I got married and graduated and stayed in Auburn. And so that was really, I saw the Lord so much in that, because he allowed me to see the finishing of things that I had started. And I got to continue to mentor girls that I had started mentoring when I was a sophomore in college, and to see them rise up to be SGA presidents, to see women for the very first time be the president of Warrior Girls and Plainsmen that had never had a female leader, was really cool. And some of those relationships were direct. There's a girl named Mary Margaret Turton who was SGA president 2 years after me that is one of my dearest friends to this day. And there are girls that I didn't have a super direct impact on, but I saw culture shift after I was SGA president. And I don't think that it was because Jacqueline, was SGA president. But I think it took somebody really willing to be able to sacrifice and go, I'm willing to do this, and it's going to be hard, but I believe it's the right thing to do. And then the tide changed because we stepped where we needed to step. And really, we stepped like God needed us to step, where he called us to. And so that was a wonderful experience. And it was interesting because we moved from Auburn to Birmingham. But we didn't move to Birmingham until all that was finished. And so to see those shifts on campus was really cool. And God was very sweet to allow me to be present to see that finish.
I love what you said. God was kind enough to let you see finish kind of what you started. And I think that for those of us that have been in leadership positions in college, which I think are probably a lot of you listening to this, college leadership positions in organizations, I think, are sometimes destined to fail, because how many companies get a new CEO every year? Not many. And the ones that do probably fail. Like, I just think about fraternities and sororities and the SGA that, getting a new leader every year, bad things can happen, which is why successional leadership is so important, of really thinking about the person behind you, which it's very clear that you were able to do that. And now you're able to see some of those culture shifts. And I love that God allowed you to kind of see some of those things through to the end, which is great.
Yeah.
But I would love to hear some just about like emotional health, because I know that's super important. It should be important to everyone. I know it's important to you. Just some of your
Yeah.
thoughts around that.
Yeah. So I was with a group of friends were my college or were my roommates right after college, and we went to Auburn Community Church in Auburn, and there was a study called Emotionally Healthy Relationships, and it just walked through your family history and the sin that's passed down from generation to generation, and what's developed in you because of your parents or because they did something or because they didn't do something. And it just gave me such a wonderful toolkit to really understand my emotions and who I became in situations, because it varied, right? When you go home to your parents, you're different. When you're around your friends, you're a little different. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but understanding why those things are the way that they are is really important. So we did that study, and Austin and I were engaged at the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, we should be going through this together. And so our very first community group at church after we were married, we dove right in. So community group, all these couples jumped into emotionally healthy relationships, and we learned so much about each other, but like also about our marriages. But what I really believe in with emotional health is that through understanding it, you remove guilt and shame. And if you're able to insert humor, life gets a lot better. And so my dad always told me, you need to be able to own up to your mistakes, but you also need to be able to just laugh at your frailties. And in our family, we very much do, and we very much get a kick out of each other. And so I got to see that displayed in our community, because we watched a video, and with all good Christian books, there's like a cheesy video to accompany it. And they were trying to talk through the concept, or they were talking through the concept of, instead of assuming like your spouse or whomever, your partner, friend, whomever is doing something wrong and going, why did you do this? And putting the blame on them, you should say, I'm puzzled as to why you did this. And so at community group every week, we would all come in with our I'm puzzled moments. But through walking through all that, which they're hysterical. I mean, they really are so funny. But through doing that and through reaching, I'm going to say, the goal of emotional health, it's something you're always working on, though. In community, when you feel like you can fully be yourself, laugh at yourself, but also understand your frailties and the impact of different things and process that emotionally, just allows you to show up better to the Lord and truly ask him what you need of him, but also for your people. And it's okay to be like, hey, I'm not having a great day today because X, but at least your because, and you also know your why. And so I think that's really important in interpersonal relationships. I think it's really important at work. And it really is the differential of getting burnout or having like a lot of conflict. I mean, if you don't understand what's driving you, for a great example is like Austin and I are both kind of drivers. We are committed to work. We love what we do. We are quick to get burnout if we did not keep in check why we're doing what we're doing. And that takes emotional health to do. And so I'm very passionate about it. Love seeing it in other people and seeing it develop and change lives.
Oh my goodness. Erica tonight, if she does something, I'm going to say, I'm puzzled as to why you did that. But that's funny. But I do think that's like a great way of putting it. And I think so often, so many of us grew up in households and we didn't have control to, the family that we were born into. And that's for better or for worse. A lot of us listening to this are probably in America, which means that we are likely blessed beyond measure compared to the rest of the world. But that doesn't mean that maybe you didn't have a father that was really loving to you or present in your life. Or that doesn't mean that you didn't grow up without much money or in a house that wasn't very emotionally healthy. And so I think being able to address some of those things can be extremely healing. So I may have to get you to share some like resources so people can dig in a little bit more.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay, awesome. Well, the way I definitely want to end today, actually maybe two more things, but I know that you and Austin I don't really want to spoil it, but what's the big thing that's happening in your life soon?
Yeah, we're adopting a baby.
Oh, yes. I'm so excited.
We're excited too.
Well, you can't just stop there. You got to tell us like about how did you decide to do this? What's the process looking like? I want to hear about it. That's just so amazing.
You were so kind to ask. Thank you. So backstory is Austin. So Austin, my husband, and both of his brothers are adopted, and my aunt, who I'm really close with and lived with for a summer in college, she and her husband fostered, and so I'd had experience with foster care, and obviously with Austin, his family adoption being at the core of who they are. That was something throughout dating we always kind of talked about, and as I think back on my life too, a lot of my decisions were just rooted in like looking at the world around me and meeting a need, more so than thinking like, what does Jacqueline want? And not to say I don't think that ever, but I think those are kind of guiding principles of what I really try to live by. And so we were engaged and listened to a sermon at ACC in James talking about taking care of widows and orphans. And also, I just really felt the call to adopt our first. And we were like, how cool would it be if we offered the first fruits of our family to God? And that is not to say that having your own kids is not doing that, because it is certainly a sacrifice, whatever way you do it. But that was just the specific call that we felt. And so it was really cool to kind of know that going into marriage, if like adoption was going to be our path. But little then did we know what an amazing way to start a family that would be. And so last summer, we actually, Austin felt very pricked to go ahead and start the adoption process. It was certainly not in the plan. I thought we had 2 more years of being young and married and having fun together. We live in a condo in downtown Birmingham and walk everywhere and kind of live a little urban life. And to be honest, I thought we had a few more years of that. And also just felt really called. And under his leadership, I was like, I'm just here to support. And like, if God is calling him to this, like as his wife, like I'm here. And so I made a to-do list per my personality. We turned it into a prayer list very quickly. I was like, this does not need to be in my hands. Otherwise we are in trouble. And so anyways, walk through the process. We went with an agency called Agape. It is a state of Alabama agency, which is really important to me since I do economic development in the state. A lot of that is tied into, your workforce and your people and your communities. And so that was an important key for me. And both of Austin's brothers were adopted through Agape, and Austin was adopted through Lifeline. So I had some touch points there. But what we loved about it was their mission is actually to help birth moms keep their babies. And so they were very upfront with us of like, our goal is not to get you a baby. Like, you are co-ministers to these women with us. And they try to resource them, help them find jobs, help them get a permanent place to live, healthcare insurance, prenatal care, emotional support, counseling, all of those things. And so the cool thing about them is they actually don't let birth moms make an adoption plan until the beginning of their 3rd trimester.
Wow.
And so they really try to help them make parenting plans up until then. And so at that point, birth moms actually get to pick their family. And so it's not a waiting list. It is not, there's nothing to it. It's really all about the mom. And so we create what we call a book. And so in that book, there's a letter from us to birth moms. There are pictures of us and our family. And Agape asked us to answer a few questions about us just so the birth moms can feel like they get to know us. And so the process really is to honor and support them. And so birth moms have different requests for different reasons. So like, let's say there's a mom in North Alabama and she doesn't want a family in North Alabama in her community because she doesn't want to run into them at the grocery store, or there's just various things. And so birth mom kind of has her preferences, and then they pull the books of the families that match what mom's looking for. And then she's able to kind of decide. And so sometimes they decide just by looking at books. Sometimes they want to meet you. It's just kind of dependent on where they're at and what their needs are. And so that's kind of the game that we're in now. We finished our home study process in December, which we laugh because we were like, oh my gosh, we needed this more than we knew. This is not for the baby. This is like for us. And so the home study process through Agape is what we call like pre-parenting counseling. So it's less about the house. It's more about the environment that you create. And so going back to the emotionally healthy study, they dive in and ask you all these questions. And Austin and I, after every session, we're like, we are so glad that we're emotionally healthy and have these conversations, because this could have been really awkward.
Yeah.
They dive in. They're like, Austin, what characteristics does Jacqueline have from her mom and dad that are good, and which ones are bad? And how do you think that's going to impact her as a mother? And if you don't talk about those things, I could imagine that the car ride home could be eventful.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So we loved the process and it was great. A lot of educational resources really reminded us how blessed we were just to have parents that looked us in the eye and played with us and cared for us. And what the absence of that could be. And that really created in us an empathy for humanity that we didn't have. A lot of people that we look at in society and look down on likely had an early childhood traumatic experience that
Mm.
impeded their brain development, caused scarring. And we just never realized that until we walked through this. So love the home study process. We're in the waiting game for a birth mom to choose us. And it's been really cool just to pray for them and pray for their babies and, to give your child up. You're not in a great spot. And so these moms live really stressful lives and it's a really stressful season for them. So we've loved it. It's been really cool for us through Agape to really value birth mom as much as we value baby. Because I think birth moms
Wow.
are often forgotten in the process. And I think people look at adoptive parents and go, oh my gosh, you're so great. You've adopted a baby, blah, blah. And the babies are, people love an adoption story, but they don't like to include the birth mom. And so it's been really cool for us to really praise birth moms and the sacrifice they're making and really want to make sure their voices are heard and their sacrifices appreciated because they're the ones that are kind of hurt most in the process. So praying towards that. We're loving it. Agape is amazing. Anybody who's ever interested, we would love to talk and share our story with that.
Wow. I love the mission of, well, first, I love the availability of you and Austin, big ACC word, availability right there. But
Yeah.
just even the mission of Agape to say, hey, we're going to try to get these moms to keep their kids. It's not just about, the people that want to adopt a kid. So I love that mission right there. But for the mom that does decide like, hey, I think it's best for this child for me to give it up, I can only imagine the moment of them flipping through a book and seeing Jacqueline and Austin, like the peace that they will feel to see a picture of y'all and read about you and know that their child is going to be taken care of. I'm like trying to not get emotional here thinking about that, but I'm just so excited. And one like principle that I learned about 2 weeks ago from our pastor, Miles,
Yeah.
it was talking about how he wants our church to have like tender-hearted compassion. And a lot of
Yeah.
times for those of us as Christians, like for example, me being vulnerable, I'll say like, yeah, God, like if you ever want me to adopt or go on a mission trip or give this certain amount of money, like, sure, I'll do it. But in the back of my mind, it's kind of like, if he writes it on the wall, I'll do it, but I'll keep my distance. And the principle that
Yeah.
we were learning is that like, we need to get close enough to
Yeah.
these difficult events to allow God to move our heart. Not that he couldn't from far
Yes.
away, but what I'm hearing you say about you and Austin is when you went through this training, it really did break your heart for humanity, like you talked about. And I think sometimes people like me, those of us in America, we like comfort. And so we keep our distance and we say we're available for these things, but we're not really getting close enough to see it because we're afraid of the discomfort or fear that it might
Yeah.
bring. And so I'm learning so much from both of y'all in getting close to something like this. And
Yeah.
I'm feeling inspired myself.
Well, it's funny you say that because our Agape, they love direct feedback too. So we love them for that. But I mean, one of their concerns for us, they were like, we see you guys, we see your heart, we honor you. One of our concerns is you haven't been close to all this brokenness.
Mm.
And they're like, you're gonna have to get real. And so it's been interesting for us to walk through this and hear birth mom stories. And there's a lot of drug use, there's a lot of alcohol use, and at first it really freaked us out because you want what's best for your child,
Mm.
absolutely. But it's been cool to see God change our heart of like, okay, our child might have alcohol fetal syndrome, and their brain might not be developed fully, and they might not go to college, but that doesn't mean God can't use that child's life in amazing ways. And so we've had to
Mm-hmm.
sacrifice a lot of our selfish desires for our kids and for our family and what our family looks like and what we're able to do. Whether it be vacations or things like that, it just looks different. It's just not in our hands. But it has called us to be close to that brokenness. And, but through that, we've seen that we have like really got to believe what God says. Like we have to believe that like God hears our prayers. We have to believe that God wants what's best for his people. And so it's really been a test of our faith of like, do we really believe those things? And have we just said that we believe them because it's easy because we haven't walked in the hard and we haven't walked in the mucky, sinful, broken world that we're in. So all that, so we've loved it. It's been so good.
Mm. Well, I'm so excited for y'all. In however long from now, once you get settled in after the adoption and everything, we'll have to have you back on for an update on how everything's going.
Yes. Or you'll just have to have
uh,
Austin, the better half, on here.
yes, that is true. We got to get Austin here too. I want to hear real quick before we end. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing with economic development, because I know you're doing some significant things. Every time I talk to Jacqueline, she's like, "Yeah, I just got back from like London, or I'm over in Atlanta, or like somewhere traveling, doing amazing things." Tell us about what you do.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking. So I have the incredible privilege of getting to work at the Birmingham Business Alliance on our economic development team. And I, along with just the best group in the world, have the job of creating more and better jobs for our community and being the first stop destination for businesses, small to large, as they want to locate in Birmingham or grow within Birmingham as well. And so there's a lot of creative ways to do that, but the mission of our organization is to create a thriving community, a thriving business community. We truly believe that jobs change lives and they can have generational impact. And so a mom being able to go from working at McDonald's to a place like Ebonic where she gets education reimbursement, 401k contributions, is able to save for her child's college or and create a first generation college student. It is so cool to see the differences that a job and a healthy work environment can make on a person and give them purpose and give them meaning. And truthfully, it's for me personally, God has designed all of us to work. And I love seeing people come alive when they find their purpose and they're able to walk in that. And so we do that in various ways. And so my role is business attraction, and so that's recruiting new businesses into Birmingham, hence a good bit of travel, which at times can seem glamorous, but is quite a sacrifice and really wears me out. I'm a well-trained introvert. And so after a long trip or a long week, I'm ready to be home in my pajamas with Austin eating pizza. That's where I want to be. But it's really cool because we get to meet with people across the nation and really the world to tell Birmingham's story, to brag on the awesome, impactful work that's happening. And I have recently gotten to specialize in our bioscience sector and our aerospace sector. And so in addition to recruiting new businesses in those areas, I also work with the existing industry and meet with businesses, hear what they've got going on, how we can help them grow, programs we have to help them create really healthy company cultures, help connect them through trade shows, trade missions, to business development opportunities so their companies can continue to thrive and contribute to the Birmingham economy. And so I've really enjoyed that. I'm not a scientist, and so I have learned a lot. I learn a lot daily. And I feel like I should walk into meetings like liberal arts, like across my head, because I'm a liberal arts grad. But it's been fun. So love what I get to do there. I think there's a beauty in creating spaces where people can thrive.
Wow, that is super impactful. I mean, you're just impacting people all the way around, and I'm learning a ton from you, and I can't wait for everybody to hear this. So, as I've been liking to end these, some people think it's cheesy, but I have to do it. I want you to tell everyone to wake up and lead because they need to. Okay, so I'm going to say it's time for you and me, and you say to wake up and lead. So, it's time for you and me
to wake up and lead.
Yes. All right. Thanks, Jacqueline.
That was awesome. So fun.